A quick note before we get started today. Leah and I are at DC Podfest, and thanks to Wildfire Radio, we recorded this episode in their mobile studio.
You're listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and have your work build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Joining us today is Danielle Daily, author of Dear Self, I Love You, Keep Going. She's a TEDx speaker, anthropologist, and host of the IGTV show, The Danielle Daily Show. Welcome, Danielle. Thanks for joining us today.
I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you.
So, Danielle, we met you today because we're all at the DC Podfest, and you had a lot of nice information to give to other people. You talked about 7 promotional tools for either a book or a podcast or whatever. Can you tell us how you came about the 7 rules?
Whether you have a book, whether you are releasing a new podcast episode, whether you have a product or service, most of the marketing cycle happens before your product service offering is actually released. And so today I was sharing how you really should start promoting whatever it is that you would like to share when you first have the idea. So you can say something as small as, I'm thinking about writing a book. What people don't realize is most people out there are leading pretty boring lives and they need things to get excited about. And the idea that somebody they know or admire is even thinking about writing a book is entertaining. And people worry about sharing something like that because they think it means that they're getting a big head or making themselves overly important. But like I said, most people aren't doing a whole lot with their lives, and by sharing something like that, you never know who you're going to inspire to do that along with you.
So you mean like put out a podcast or put out a Facebook post, say, I'm thinking today of writing a book.
Whatever social media you enjoy using, just share your thoughts. Start with, hey, I'm thinking about writing a book. And then when you decide on the topic of the book, say, hey, I think my book's going to be about this. And then you could say, this November, I'm going to spend an hour each day writing my book. And then after that, you can say, hey, I got the first chapter done and I'm starting to look for an agent or I'm starting to look for a publisher. And even if you never get to the point of having a publisher, if you say, for instance, end up self-publishing, share every step along the way. That was really the message that I was communicating today, was that share every step along the way because people want to go on that adventure and that journey with you.
So what about the embarrassment factor? Like, hey, Matt, you never did write that book. You said you were going to do it back in November, and here it is November again, and you haven't done anything yet.
Well, it's interesting when we put it out there that we're going to do something. It really does help us to be accountable to what we said we're going to do. So in a way, you could actually use shame as a motivator for yourself.
Right, get you going.
Yes.
So tell us about your book.
Yeah, so my book has an interesting story, and I'd never thought about it until you guys asked me to do this interview. But my book used all of these processes before I had actually thought them through. So my book, Dear Self, I Love You, Keep Going, was a series of notes that I wrote to myself as I was grieving ending my marriage. And I needed some way to remind myself each day that the process I was going through, even though it felt awful and I was grieving, it was something that was worth going through and that I was learning something about myself. So the first note to self that is in the book, I actually had found myself talking to myself in the mirror and telling myself how much I loved myself and how proud I was of myself and encouraging myself. And I just thought, I want to remember this day because I know there are going to be days when I'm going to feel like, he left you because you are a terrible wife and, all those things that we
Negative
tell ourselves.
things, yeah.
Yes. And I thought, I'm having a positive moment. I want to record this. And so I typed it up and I posted it on Facebook because that's where I'm very active. And the response was incredible because people were like, can I print this out and put this on my window
Wow.
or my mirror in my bathroom? And I was like, oh, that feels good. I made people happy, and I feel terrible right now. So that made people happy, which made me feel good. So I thought to myself, oh, I'll write another one tomorrow. And I got the same sort of encouraging response where people were like, this is really powerful. It's so wonderful to hear a woman talking about herself in such a positive way, even though she's going through something very human and very painful. And it wasn't until I'd been writing them daily for about 3 months that the little cartoon light bulb floated above my head and said, hey, if you write one of these every day for a year, you'll have a book. Wow. And so I just thought, you know what? I'm going to go for it, because although I'd never voiced it, I had a lifelong dream of becoming an author. And through the most painful, horrendous experience in my life, the gift, the reward for that was that I fulfilled a dream.
Something you never expected.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, I also think it's interesting that not only did you touch people, but they took the time to tell you. I mean, that is huge, because a lot of people will just not. They'll be, oh, that is so great, and maybe they'll tell other people, which is wonderful. But the author or originator of the thing never knows. The post doesn't know. So, wow, you really hit the nerve with people. So that's wonderful, a positive nerve.
And it was wonderful to feel people's response. And, you know, it's funny because there are a lot of people who see things but never respond on social media. But then you'll see them out in the real world and they'll say, hey, you know, I read that thing. And you're thinking, I didn't even know you saw that thing. But it impacted them. You never know how you're impacting people. And you know, when I think back on how I wrote that, I was pre-promoting my book before I even knew I had a book.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's cool that you guys made me think about that, because I'd never put that together before. Thank you.
So then you wrote up 365 of them.
Yes.
Did it take a year?
It took, yes, because I wrote one every day and I didn't rush ahead and I didn't write back. I truly committed.
You didn't do 10 in one day and take a week a week off or anything?
No,
Wow.
I truly committed to reflecting on what I'd learned that day or how I wanted to encourage myself. And what's interesting is, you know, being the author of the book, you don't see it the same way people on the outside see it, because you're in it. And especially because I was living it. It wasn't like I was reflecting back on like reflections on pain or something like that. It was literally I was going through it. When other people read the book, they said the reason they liked it so much is because it was raw and honest, and you could see my process emotionally from going to being devastated to being like, I'm not sure if I can survive this, to, okay, maybe I could, and then, oh, I'm starting to do better, and, oh, I feel good today, and then ultimately, I'm going to be okay, and I'm going to be better than okay. I'm going to be better than ever. And they love that because it wasn't polished up and like, oh, here's the story, the post version. It was right in the thick of it.
Yes, that's wonderful.
Real.
Yeah,
It was real. What about finding a publisher for your book?
You know, the publishing thing is interesting. I decided to go ahead and self-publish, and that was a mistake. Because when I had the book put together and formatted, it's, 365 entries plus forward and backward.
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yeah, and I just didn't know what I didn't know. All I knew was that people were asking for this, and I wanted to publish it. So I ended up having to publish it as an ebook because it's beautifully illustrated. It is full color, and printing a 400-page book, even if you do a large run, only my mom is going to buy a book at that price. So I wish, in a way, that I could have thought ahead and known more about how to go about getting an agent and publishing it that way, because now when I think about doing that, it's like, well, it's already out there in ebook form. Is it really worth all the work? And maybe at some point I will. I've had a publisher approach me about publishing a different book, so that may happen in the future. But my first book, because of its length and the full color nature of the guts, it is still in an ebook form.
And what about the cover? The cover is very cute.
Thank you. So it was interesting. I have no design skills. And so all I did was I went once again to Facebook, to my social circle on social media, and I said, hey, I want a beautiful cover. And people recommended some different people. And there was this one woman that was recommended to me, and she actually lives in, oh my goodness, it's like Norway or Sweden or some
okay.
other country, and English isn't even the first language there. And I could feel her vibe that she understood me. So I just sent her the barest bones of what the book was about. And she designed this beautiful cover, and I made very few adjustments to what she'd made. She just captured me and who I am and what I was trying to convey so beautifully. It was
what a
perfect.
nice feeling.
It was because if you had asked me what do I want the cover to look like, I'm sure I would have come up with something that was absolute garbage. But because I was so clear on the emotion that I wanted to convey and who I am as a person, it was wonderful. And so here's the interesting thing about the cover, though, is when I showed people the cover, there were many people who disliked it.
Oh, really?
Yes, because they said, you should be in red. You're so bold. You're so in your face. And it was interesting because I loved the cover because I knew that it resonated with me, because although I am a bold and direct person, I'm also very soft. And to have something that was red and black and really in your face, it wasn't resonant with the message, and it wasn't resonant with who I am.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I like that's
Right.
pretty neat.
It
It's
is.
interesting how you put the thought into it and how you see yourself also. So it's a self-discovery. Mm-hmm. Just by putting a note up one day, to me, it's just it's amazing
Right.
what happens. We always go day by day, like, oh, another day, but these little things all make a difference in our life. It's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty.
It's also cool that artist could. It's just amazing to me how artists can do that. Take one little thing, know just a little bit about you, and come up with the right thing that we would never come up with.
I think that's real talent, and it's interesting because my show, the Danielle Daily Show, the way that most people do shows is they think about, okay, what do I want the story to be of the show, and then they go out and they shoot or they record what is going to reflect that story. I do it the opposite way when I do my show. I go out and I capture a bunch of video and things that I want to show, and then I go home and I think, okay, what's the story behind this? And I tell it. And it's just a different way of being creative.
Yeah, pretty good. Sounds good.
Very
We'll have to
neat.
check it out.
Yeah. So, do you have any advice for people who are thinking about writing a book?
I think a lot of people put pressure on themselves that I need to sit down and write this book. But imagine if you just wrote a line every day like I did, or a paragraph every day for a year. If you just committed to doing something on it every day for a year, how much further would you be? How many years have you spent thinking, I need to commit to, a month or weeks or many months or years? How I need to go away to a secluded cabin in the woods before I can write my book. But what if you just made it a daily practice, sort of like meditation or prayer or brushing your teeth? It was just part of your
That's
day.
a good, yes.
Right.
Yes. A lot of the authors we speak to are not good at marketing. They have their ideas, they write their book, and they're like, I don't want to tell anyone. So you seem to be a very good expert on marketing. Can you give us a couple of tips for our listeners?
Yes, I love marketing because marketing is really just about building relationships. So I will give the same tip that I gave to everyone in the room this morning to start out with. Share every step along the way. People want to hear what you're up to. The other tip I would give is don't be afraid to approach people who have a larger audience than you to share what it is you have. So one of the reasons I'm here at DC Podfest is not because I have a podcast, but because I have been interviewed on numerous podcasts. And that's how I do a lot of my marketing, is these other hosts interview me, and that helps me to get the word out about my book or my show or whatever it is that I'm promoting. So think about people who already have an audience that would like to hear about what it is that you as the creative have created. And you'd be surprised how many people out there are looking for guests to
Sure,
share your
absolutely.
stuff.
Well, that is, when you just said it, it makes so much sense, but you don't think about that. Of course, you should be going to someone who has more,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it
that's why
just-
Danielle's here to
Yeah.
put sense in our
Yeah.
head.
I guess so. So thank you.
So are you doing any other promotion besides social media?
So I don't do any like radio or TV ads. I do word of mouth, in-person marketing, those kinds of networking type things. But yeah, social media and and human to human I have found the best way. I have actually done TV. I've been on TV promoting my book and other things like that, and that's a lot of fun. What people don't realize about that is it's wonderful for your positioning and your credibility, but it's not going to make your phone ring off the hook.
Yeah. Right. And then your IGTV show, do you promote your book there, or is it just daily Go Team?
It was additional notes to self and a daily Go Team sort of thing. I did over 100 episodes that way, and then I decided I wanted to reinvent the show, so I put it on break for a little while, and when I brought it back in August of 2018, I decided it was going to be more about sharing my adventures in life and going out doing cool things like going mushroom hunting for the first time or having a professional photo shoot and showing the behind the scenes of that, things like that. And I don't really promote my book much on it, but maybe in the future, maybe you got me thinking about something.
And how can our listeners best reach you?
Yes, so I'm very active on Facebook and Instagram. You can find me on Instagram at _Danielle Daily. And if you want to follow my Facebook page, I'm at the Danielle Daily.
Okay, and Matt, you'll put it on the show notes?
On our show notes, yep. So thank you, Danielle. You're a great guest today. Gave us a lot of great advice, so thank you very much for joining us.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.